how determined to see regime change do you think Trump is? I mean, he claims he's seen it already in a completely feeble way, it seems to me, but genuine regime change. Does Trump want that? Will he strive to get that in any way?
I gave up trying to understand his deepest intents a long time ago, but I think based on his record, regime change has never been at the core of Donald Trump's philosophy. Power is at the core of his philosophy, but he ran very much on a platform of saying regime change is an unworthy goal. His vice president, J.D. Vance, made that a core tenet of his political rise. And that's part of why his base, or some parts of his base, have been so surprised and disappointed by this conflict. So I think that specific goal is one of the objectives of this war that I think he's most likely to walk away from, rather than the uranium enrichment or the nature of that demand or control over the strait. I think regime change is the one that he'd be happiest in relative terms to cede.
One of the things that's still sitting there is almost 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, that enough for roughly 10 bombs. The US regime insists that Iran surrenders that. How likely do you think it is that the regime will be willing to trade that in highly enriched uranium for, say, sanctions relief?
They will come out of this war with extensive damage to their infrastructure, their steel industry, their petrochemical industry. Iran is going to need investment to deal with that, to fix that. And anyone you talk to in the region, any diplomat who's spoken to the Iranians or has been engaged in talks over the past few weeks, says what they want coming out of this war is money. And you don't get money unless you get sanctions relief from the Americans. So I think the more pragmatic people in Tehran will understand that they have to make a deal around their nuclear program. I'm still skeptical they will go all the way to a zero enrichment deal. They have made this such a point of national pride now for years through multiple rounds of failed negotiations with the Trump administration. They may still insist on some perhaps token enrichment capacity, but they beyond that will have to make nuclear concessions, particularly on this highly enriched uranium. I think they will be willing to do that. But it's this interesting moment now where the nuclear program has been such a focal point of international diplomacy for decades, going back to the George W. Bush administration. And yet over the past 6 weeks, it seemed like the least of everyone's concerns in the Middle East. I was speaking to someone earlier today who said, if I had to choose, if it was up to me, I want a deal where Iran gives up its drones, not its uranium, because the drones are the things that are being used to attack oil and gas infrastructure, to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz. I think Iran will be willing to negotiate around the nuclear program. The other things, I think it will be much more reluctant to talk about missiles, drones, things like that.
I agree entirely with Greg. I think you have to separate the highly enriched material that it already has from the notion of having some enrichment capability up to a particular limit within international bounds down the line. I don't think it's willing to cede that second principle. The first, it is ready to trade.
But that would be a real victory. I think that, I mean, to my mind, if Iran were willing to trade away that highly enriched uranium, I think that would count as a genuine result, actually, from the war.
The irony is that we were in that position before the war. That was what was on the table before all of this started. Diplomacy could have resulted in that. Perhaps it still can. War isn't able to achieve that. And there's something else which I think kind of Iran now feels that it has, which may be even superior to a nuclear weapon, and that is its weapon of mass disruption, its control over the Strait of Hormuz, and its ability to continue to have this stranglehold on the global economy, which it's going to be its primary weapon and could end up being far more powerful as a deterrent than a nuclear program.
So you've all raised the possibility of using that weapon as a way to make money by creating a kind of toll on the Strait of Hormuz, but it's also something that is a potential weapon of mass disruption, a deterrent, if you like. Can it be both of those things? Will it be both of those things? Greg, what do you think?
I'm hearing a lot of skepticism about this toll booth idea in the region. In wartime, absolutely, Iran can charge ships tolls. It's doing that already. If you're worried about a physical threat to your safety going through the strait, of course, you will pay whatever the Iranians are asking. But in peacetime, if you want to charge those tolls, you need some threat to back that up, right? There needs to be a form of coercion involved with that, unless you get Donald Trump to somehow agree to this and put it into the ceasefire terms, which would make all of America's allies in the Gulf furious. I mean, it's not impossible. Somebody was joking to me the other day that perhaps the Iranians can do a deal where Trump Jr.'s cryptocurrency firm gets a cut of the profits and it's paid in cryptocurrency. And you could actually imagine that happening.
You laugh now, Greg.
Exactly. I tend to think this toll booth idea might be something that the Iranians negotiate with. It's a card that they can offer to make a concession around. And here, it's similar to the dilemma about the highly enriched uranium that Nick was alluding to. Why does Iran have this highly enriched uranium? Because Donald Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018, and Joe Biden couldn't negotiate a new one, and Iran slowly started to violate the agreement. Giving that up, yes, it's a concession, but it brings us just back to where we were before Trump abandoned the deal. And I think it's the same thing now. Why is Iran charging tolls in the Strait? Because of the war. If it offers to stop charging tolls, okay, that's a concession, but it's conceding something that it's only doing because of this conflict.
My biggest worry about, or my biggest block to giving up the highly enriched uranium is that you do that once, it's gone. Whereas the relieving sanctions is a kind of continuous process that can be reversed. And the level of trust between Iran and the United States and Israel is so low that I think you have to have trust that this sanctions relief is going to be enduring. And that's a hurdle to get over, isn't it, Nick?
It is, except for the fact that Iran has discovered this new leverage which it hadn't really exercised in the past. And that is going to be something which it sees as something which is ongoing. And the irony of all of this is that, in part, Iran is discovering a foreign policy, I think, which dates back to the time of the Shah. Whether or not it charges tolls could be an open question, but I think it does now see its role, as in the time of the Shah, as a regional policeman of the Gulf, and this is what it wants to secure going forward.
I just think that this whole discussion illuminates how dramatically each party's conception of its own power has evolved in quite a short amount of time. I mean, it used to be that Iranian power, at least from the perspective of the United States, which I'm representing in this panel, was all about its nuclear capabilities. And now its capabilities have been revealed to be much broader. Its abilities to pull on different levers to exert pressure on its enemies or allies alike has, whether it's the drones and ballistics program, whether it's its control over the state, it now has these latent abilities it hadn't fully exercised before and is now in the position to do so.